The courtroom was quiet, every breath held in as Judge Albert Thompson, known to all for his strict nature and harsh punishments, leaned forward and narrowed his eyes at the young woman before him. Jasmine Crockett stood calmly at the defendant's table, her dark eyes fixed gently but fearlessly on the judge. "Miss Crockett," Judge Thompson began slowly, his voice heavy and cold, "you dare disrespect my courtroom by wearing that symbol around your neck?" Jasmine touched the small silver cross that rested gently around her neck, confused by the judge's harsh tone. "Your Honor," she replied softly, "I meant no disrespect. It is simply a part of who I am." The judge banged his gavel loudly, echoing through the room and startling everyone. "No religious symbols are allowed in my courtroom. Your blatant disregard for my rules is unacceptable. I am fining you $5,000 immediately." A shocked gasp spread across the courtroom, whispers quickly erupting from every corner. Jasmine's lawyer tried to speak, but Judge Thompson silenced him instantly with a sharp glance. "But Your Honor," Jasmine began, her voice trembling slightly. "Silence," the judge boomed. "Pay the fine now, or I'll have you held in contempt." With dignity that surprised everyone watching, Jasmine nodded slowly. "As you wish, Your Honor. I will pay your fine, but justice will not be silenced today." A sneer crossed the judge's face, clearly believing he'd won. But just as Jasmine opened her purse to pay the fine, the courtroom door burst open. All eyes turned toward the entrance. An older gentleman walked quickly toward the judge, handed him a sealed envelope, whispered something, and quickly left. Judge Thompson's face turned pale, his hands shaking visibly as he read the letter. Without another word, he abruptly stood up and declared, "Court is adjourned for an hour." With that, he fled from the bench, leaving a stunned and murmuring courtroom behind. The spectators buzzed with whispers, their curiosity burning. What could have scared the fearless Judge Thompson so severely? And how was it related to Jasmine Crockett? Jasmine, still standing with her fine unpaid, looked curiously toward her lawyer, sensing something enormous was about to unfold. Hours earlier that day, Jasmine Crockett awoke with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. Today was the day she'd face Judge Thompson in court. It was her very first time standing in a courtroom, but she was ready, or at least she hoped she was. Jasmine was not a typical young woman. She was a brilliant, talented, and celebrated legal mind, already making headlines for her sharp intellect and unmatched courage, despite being barely 28. She had become well known as a lawyer who defended the rights of those who couldn't speak for themselves, earning respect and admiration from everyone around her. That morning, Jasmine's mother helped her straighten the silver cross that hung from her neck, a gift Jasmine had worn since childhood. "Remember, Jasmine," her mother whispered, holding her daughter's hand tightly, "you're not just defending yourself today, you're defending justice itself." "I know, Mama," Jasmine smiled bravely. "I won't let you down." But Jasmine could never have imagined how difficult today would become. Entering the courthouse that morning, she noticed how crowded it had become. It was unusual, but people seemed especially interested in her case today. As Jasmine made her way into the courtroom, eyes followed her, whispers trailing behind her every step. But Jasmine simply squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and confidently sat down with her lawyer at the defendant's table. Judge Albert Thompson entered the courtroom moments later, his heavy footsteps echoing ominously. The judge was known far and wide as stern, unforgiving, and often harsh. People feared him, and few dared challenge his authority. The case began calmly enough. The accusations brought against Jasmine were baseless, petty charges that had no real proof. She was confident they'd be dismissed quickly. But suddenly, Judge Thompson's piercing gaze fell upon the small silver cross she wore. "Miss Crockett," Judge Thompson spoke in a cold, strict tone, "do you believe you can openly defy my courtroom rules?" Confusion filled Jasmine's heart. She had not been aware of such rules. She knew judges held significant authority, but this seemed too harsh and unusual. As Judge Thompson continued, Jasmine felt her confidence waver slightly, his booming voice intimidating and aggressive. People watched in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. A respected and beloved young lawyer was being publicly humiliated for something so minor. Her lawyer quickly stood to defend her. "Your Honor, surely this is not worth such severe." But Judge Thompson quickly silenced him. "Sit down, counselor. I won't warn you again." Jasmine's heart beat faster, but she refused to let fear overcome her. "Your Honor, I'm sorry. I was unaware of your rule. I meant no disrespect." Judge Thompson ignored her apology entirely, hammering his gavel once more, his voice raised. Miss Crockett, a fine of $5,000 must be paid immediately for your defiance. Any further disrespect, and I'll hold you in contempt of court." Gasps filled the courtroom again. It seemed incredibly unfair and overly harsh. Jasmine, although hurt and shocked, maintained her dignity and composure, opening her purse to pay the fine. It was precisely at this moment that everything changed. Just as Jasmine was about to hand the money over, the doors burst open, bringing everything to a sudden halt. Now, standing in the courtroom during the brief recess, Jasmine felt all eyes upon her. What was happening? What was in that mysterious envelope that frightened Judge Thompson so greatly? People gathered closely around her, desperate for answers. Jasmine's lawyer put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Jasmine, whatever this is, we'll face it together." Before Jasmine could respond, the bailiff returned, looking directly at her. "Miss Crockett, Judge Thompson will see you privately in his chambers immediately." The whispers around her intensified, everyone amazed and puzzled at the extraordinary turn of events. Jasmine's heart raced, confusion swirling through her mind. Taking a deep breath, she slowly followed the bailiff toward the judge's chambers, her mind spinning with endless possibilities. As she walked down the long hallway, every step echoed loudly in her ears. What could the judge possibly want with her? Was she in even more trouble? Or was there something far more complicated at play? Approaching Judge Thompson's chambers, Jasmine paused at the door, hesitating for only a moment before knocking gently. "Enter," came the judge's deep, troubled voice from inside. With one last, steadying breath, Jasmine stepped inside. Immediately, she noticed Judge Thompson seated behind his large desk, a deeply worried look etched onto his normally stern face. He gestured quietly for her to sit down. "Miss Crockett," he began slowly, his voice softened with unusual humility, "it seems I may have gravely misjudged you." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, her curiosity now even stronger. "Your Honor," she replied gently, "please tell me what's happening." Judge Thompson looked down, clearly struggling to find his words. Finally, he lifted his eyes to meet hers, filled with sincerity and regret. "I have just learned of your true identity, Miss Crockett. I had no idea about your brilliance and the respect you've earned among your peers. More importantly, I've realized you've come here today for a very important reason, one that involves powerful people who wish to silence you." Jasmine stared back, shocked beyond words. The room seemed to spin around her. What powerful people? What was the judge talking about? Before she could ask more, Judge Thompson leaned forward urgently, lowering his voice to nearly a whisper. "Jasmine, your life is in serious danger, and now mine is too. We must." A sudden noise at the door made them both jump, cutting off his words sharply. Someone was outside the chambers, and whoever it was clearly did not want Jasmine to hear what Judge Thompson was about to reveal. Jasmine turned sharply, her heart racing in fear as the door to Judge Thompson's chambers burst open. Standing in the doorway was a tall, imposing man wearing dark sunglasses and an expensive suit. His presence immediately filled the room with tension. Without waiting for an invitation, he stepped inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. "Excuse my interruption," the stranger said coldly, glancing at Jasmine and Judge Thompson with an unsettling calmness. "But it seems there's something important being discussed here. Perhaps you'd like to share." Judge Thompson paled even more, visibly terrified by the man's sudden appearance. He fumbled nervously, his eyes darting between Jasmine and the stranger, uncertain of what to say. Jasmine quickly sensed the danger, but she held her composure. "Who are you?" she asked firmly, hiding the trembling of her voice as best as she could. "This is a private conversation." The man stepped closer, removing his sunglasses slowly to reveal sharp, icy blue eyes. He stared directly at Jasmine, his gaze piercing and intimidating. "My name is Alexander Reed," he answered smoothly, his voice deceptively calm. "And I already know exactly who you are, Miss Crockett. I've come here today because certain people are very interested in your actions, particularly your habit of challenging those who prefer silence over truth." Judge Thompson tried to intervene, speaking weakly. "Mr. Reed, please, this isn't necessary. Miss Crockett poses no threat." Alexander Reed shot Judge Thompson a cold glare, silencing him instantly. "You've already made enough mistakes today, Judge," he snapped harshly. "Don't add another." Jasmine felt her anger rising, her courage slowly returning. She stood firmly, meeting Alexander's gaze with determination. "If you've come here to threaten me," she said clearly, "you've wasted your time. I won't stop fighting for what's right, no matter how powerful you think you are." Alexander smiled slightly, though his eyes remained cold and dangerous. Miss Crockett, bravery is admirable, but foolishness can be fatal. Before Jasmine could reply, Alexander Reed turned to leave, pausing briefly at the door to deliver one final chilling remark. Remember, both of you, silence often ensures safety. It would be wise for you to remember that. Then, as quickly as he'd arrived, he disappeared into the hallway, leaving Jasmine and Judge Thompson shaken and alone. Silence filled the chambers, heavy and tense. Judge Thompson took a deep breath, visibly shaken. "Miss Crockett," he began nervously, "now you see why I was so disturbed. Alexander Reed represents people far more dangerous than you can imagine. Who is he working for?" Jasmine demanded, feeling more determined than ever. The judge hesitated, clearly terrified of saying too much. Finally, after a moment, he leaned in closer, whispering urgently, "He's connected to one of the most powerful corporations in the country, one that has influence in every court, every city, even every corner of the government. They call themselves VexCorp, and they will stop at nothing to silence anyone who opposes them." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly, realizing the scope of what she was facing. "VexCorp? I've heard of them, but what could they possibly want with me?" The judge glanced anxiously around, clearly still terrified. "You've uncovered something they're desperate to hide, something about the cases you've been winning lately. I didn't know until just moments ago, but your recent court victories have threatened their biggest secret." Jasmine's mind raced, trying to think of what that secret could possibly be. Suddenly, everything started falling into place. The petty charges against her, the harsh fine for her cross necklace, even the threats from Alexander Reed. This was far more serious than she had realized. "You must tell me what you've learned," Jasmine pleaded. "If there's something I need to know, you have to help me." Judge Thompson hesitated again, obviously conflicted. He finally nodded, realizing he had no choice. "There's a file," he whispered quietly, "a secret file, hidden within this courthouse itself. It contains evidence, clear proof of VexCorp's corruption. They control dozens of powerful people in positions like mine. If you find that file, you might just be able to stop them." Jasmine leaned forward, urgency filling her voice. "Tell me exactly where it is. I'll find it, no matter what it takes." The judge hesitated one last time, clearly terrified. Finally, his voice trembling, he spoke. "It's hidden deep in the archives beneath this building. But Miss Crockett, if you go after it, you must know the danger you'll be facing. Once you start down this path, you can't turn back." Jasmine nodded bravely, her voice strong and resolute. "I understand, Your Honor, but justice is worth every risk." With renewed courage, Jasmine quickly left the judge's chambers, determined to act swiftly. Her heart pounded as she navigated through the courthouse, quickly moving toward the archives below. She could feel eyes following her every move, the tension around her growing thicker with each passing moment. Soon, Jasmine found herself standing before the large doors of the archive room, deep beneath the courthouse. With a careful glance around, making sure no one was watching, she slipped inside. Immediately, she began searching through endless rows of files, cabinets, and boxes, her pulse racing with anticipation. As minutes passed, Jasmine began to feel despair creeping in. The archive was enormous, filled with thousands of documents, hidden secrets stretching back many years. How would she possibly find the one file she needed? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. Jasmine froze, her heart nearly stopping with fear. Quickly, she hid behind a row of shelves, holding her breath, hoping whoever it was would pass by. But the footsteps stopped directly outside the archive door. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing Alexander Reed once again, flanked by two menacing-looking security guards. Jasmine's heart raced as Alexander calmly stepped inside, glancing around with an unsettling smile. "Miss Crockett," he called out quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the silence, "I know you're here. You cannot hide from me." Fear surged through Jasmine, but she fought desperately to stay calm, staying silent and still, praying they wouldn't find her. Alexander continued softly, his voice deadly calm. "You're smart, Jasmine. You're courageous. It's truly admirable. But don't you think you've pushed your luck far enough?" He stepped closer, his cold eyes scanning every shadow. "VexCorp will not allow you to expose us. If you surrender now, we might let you live." Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes, fear nearly paralyzing her. But she refused to move. She refused to give in. "Very well," Alexander sighed softly, glancing toward his guards. "Find her. Jasmine listened helplessly as the guards began searching every corner of the room, slowly approaching her hiding place. Her mind raced desperately. She needed a miracle. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from outside the archive, startling Alexander and his men. There was yelling and running footsteps. Something had happened. Alexander hesitated briefly, his face darkening angrily. "We need to go," he snapped to his guards, clearly frustrated. "But don't worry, Jasmine," he added coldly, raising his voice to be heard clearly. "We'll be back for you soon." With that, Alexander and his men left quickly, shutting the door firmly behind them, leaving Jasmine trembling and alone once more. Jasmine's relief was short-lived. She knew Alexander was serious. She had very little time left. But just as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. Hidden deep within a cabinet, almost invisible, she spotted a thin, dusty file marked simply with one name: VexCorp. Jasmine's heart leaped in excitement and dread. Quickly, she pulled the file out, feeling her hands shaking as she opened it, revealing pages and pages of terrifying secrets. Her eyes widened in horror as she read. But before Jasmine could fully process what she'd found, the lights in the archives flickered off suddenly, plunging the room into complete darkness. Then, Jasmine heard a terrifying voice whisper directly behind her. "Did you really think you'd escape so easily?" Jasmine's heart nearly stopped. Fear surged through every nerve in her body as the chilling voice echoed through the darkness behind her. She felt someone standing dangerously close, their cold breath brushing her neck. "Turn around slowly, Miss Crockett," the voice whispered again, sinister and calm, "and hand over that file." Gathering every ounce of courage she had left, Jasmine turned slowly, clutching the precious file tightly in her trembling hands. Standing mere inches away from her was Alexander Reed, his cold blue eyes glowing dangerously in the dimness of the archive room. He had returned silently, alone this time, making Jasmine feel even more vulnerable. "Did you really think I'd leave without ensuring you posed no threat?" Alexander's voice was icy, and his stare held a frightening intensity. "I won't let you silence the truth," Jasmine said defiantly, despite the terror gripping her. "No matter what you do, the truth will always find its way out." Alexander laughed softly, the sound sending chills down Jasmine's spine. "You are brave, Jasmine, I'll give you that. But bravery won't protect you this time. Give me the file, and I promise your life will remain intact." Jasmine hesitated, her mind racing frantically. She knew the file was her only hope of exposing VexCorp's sinister actions. But she also knew how dangerous Alexander truly was. "No," Jasmine finally whispered, determination blazing in her eyes. "I won't give it to you. I'd rather die fighting for what's right than live by keeping silent." Alexander's face twisted angrily, clearly losing patience. He reached forward suddenly, grabbing her wrist roughly, pulling the file from her grip. Jasmine fought back desperately, crying out and trying to reclaim it. "Let go!" Jasmine shouted, struggling fiercely. The noise of their struggle echoed loudly through the archives, each moment filled with panic and desperation. Just when Jasmine felt the situation was hopeless, a sudden noise exploded into the room, a loud crash, followed by shouting voices. The door burst open, flooding the darkened archive room with sudden bright light. 2 police officers rushed inside, their weapons drawn, followed closely by Judge Thompson, who looked desperate and frightened. Immediately, the officers pointed their guns toward Alexander, ordering him to release Jasmine. "Step away from her now," one of the officers commanded sharply. Alexander quickly let go of Jasmine, raising his hands slowly, his cold expression never faltering. Jasmine collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily and clutching the file protectively to her chest. Judge Thompson moved quickly toward Jasmine, helping her gently to her feet, his face filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he whispered urgently. "I'm okay," Jasmine said shakily, still trembling from the terrifying encounter. "Thank you." Alexander was quickly handcuffed, but even in restraints, his dangerous calmness never wavered. He stared directly into Jasmine's eyes, a sinister smile forming on his lips. "This isn't over," he said darkly. "You think you've won today, but VexCorp always gets what it wants." "Take him away," Judge Thompson ordered firmly, turning his attention back to Jasmine as Alexander was led from the room. "Jasmine, we need to get you somewhere safe." "What about the file?" Jasmine asked urgently, still clutching it tightly. "It needs to be protected." "Yes, of course," Judge Thompson nodded quickly. "Bring it with you. We need to move now." Quickly, they exited the archives, walking swiftly through the courthouse corridors. Jasmine felt relief flood through her, knowing she'd barely escaped a horrifying fate. Yet the relief didn't last long. Judge Thompson led her out to a waiting car, driven by a trusted friend named Detective Laura Bennett. Jasmine felt a comforting sense of safety as she sat down in the back seat beside Judge Thompson, the file still safely clutched in her arms. As Detective Bennett sped away from the courthouse, Jasmine finally allowed herself a moment to breathe, feeling somewhat safer. The car raced silently through dark city streets, heading towards a secret safe house far from prying eyes. "We're almost there," Detective Bennett assured her quietly, sensing Jasmine's lingering fear. "You'll be safe soon." But suddenly, Jasmine's relief shattered entirely. In a horrifying instant, blinding headlights appeared out of nowhere behind them, speeding forward dangerously fast. Detective Bennett glanced sharply into the rearview mirror, panic rising quickly in her voice. "Hold on," she shouted urgently, pressing down harder on the gas pedal. The mysterious car pursued relentlessly, gaining ground quickly. Jasmine gripped her seat tightly, her heart pounding fiercely as Judge Thompson shouted instructions desperately to Detective Bennett. "Turn left here. Quickly," Judge Thompson shouted. Detective Bennett swerved abruptly, narrowly avoiding a collision. The tires screeched loudly, echoing through the quiet streets. Jasmine felt tears of fear stinging her eyes, panic nearly overwhelming her as she struggled to hold on. But their pursuers were relentless. Again and again, they tried forcing the detective's car off the road, each attempt more aggressive and dangerous than the last. Jasmine knew this was VexCorp's doing. They were desperate to silence her forever. "Who are these people?" Jasmine shouted in fear, unable to contain her panic. "VexCorp operatives," Judge Thompson shouted back, his face tense and pale. "They won't stop until they've stopped us." As the chase intensified, Jasmine clutched the file desperately, knowing she had to protect it at all costs. Detective Bennett navigated desperately through narrow streets and sharp corners, but their pursuers remained dangerously close, never relenting. Finally, Jasmine saw an opening ahead, a crowded intersection bustling with traffic and pedestrians. Detective Bennett noticed it too, quickly formulating a plan. "Hold on tight," she warned Jasmine and Judge Thompson. "I'm about to do something crazy." Without another word, Detective Bennett drove swiftly into the crowded intersection, skillfully weaving between cars and pedestrians. Horns blared loudly, frightened people shouting and scattering as their vehicle moved swiftly through the chaos. The pursuing car was quickly blocked by traffic, screeching to a halt and unable to follow further. For a moment, Jasmine breathed easier, her heart racing wildly. They had escaped again, but she knew safety was only temporary. Finally, after a tense journey, Detective Bennett pulled the car quietly into a hidden alleyway, the shadows of the night providing temporary shelter. She quickly turned off the engine, glancing toward Jasmine with intense seriousness. "This isn't over yet," she warned quietly. "They'll keep coming, Jasmine. We must move swiftly to the safe house. It's our only chance." Jasmine nodded, exhausted and shaken. Quickly, they exited the car, following Detective Bennett cautiously through darkened alleys and quiet streets. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they arrived safely at the hidden safe house, an old abandoned building on the outskirts of town. Detective Bennett ushered Jasmine inside, quickly locking every door and window behind them. Judge Thompson paced nervously, worry etched deeply on his face. "Are we safe here?" Jasmine asked softly, still clutching the file tightly. "For now," Detective Bennett nodded gently, reassuringly. "But we must hurry. I'll call for help immediately. Reinforcements are coming." Just as she finished speaking, a sudden sharp noise erupted outside, the sound of tires screeching to a stop nearby. Judge Thompson turned pale, fear clear in his eyes. "No," he whispered helplessly. "They've found us again." Detective Bennett drew her weapon instantly, motioning Jasmine and Judge Thompson quickly toward the back exit. But before they could move, the front door exploded inward, shattering violently as dark figures burst through the doorway. Jasmine screamed, her voice lost amidst the chaos and noise. Menacing figures surrounded them swiftly, their faces masked and threatening. Detective Bennett aimed her weapon bravely, trying desperately to shield Jasmine. Suddenly, a tall, familiar figure stepped forward, removing his mask slowly to reveal Alexander Reed, his cold eyes fixed directly on Jasmine. His voice was sinister and deadly calm as he smiled chillingly. "You didn't think you'd truly escape, did you, Miss Crockett?" Alexander spoke softly, dangerously, slowly approaching her. Now, hand over that file, or your friends here will pay the price. Surrounded and terrified, Jasmine knew she had to make a choice that could cost them everything. Jasmine stood frozen in fear, her heart pounding uncontrollably as Alexander Reed slowly approached, his cold blue eyes locked onto hers. The menacing figures surrounding them remained perfectly still, ready to strike at Alexander's command. Detective Bennett held her gun firmly, sweat forming on her forehead, unsure how to handle this terrifying standoff. Judge Thompson stood quietly beside Jasmine, his expression one of utter hopelessness. "Give me the file, Jasmine," Alexander repeated softly, his voice filled with dangerous authority. "You can't protect your friends unless you cooperate. You know what I'll do if you don't." Jasmine hesitated, her eyes quickly darting between Judge Thompson and Detective Bennett. She couldn't bear the thought of putting them in more danger. Yet handing over the file would mean losing their only evidence against VexCorp. Jasmine knew it would mean defeat, not just for her, but for justice itself. "I won't give you this file," Jasmine said finally, her voice shaking but filled with resolve. "If you want it, you'll have to take it from me." Alexander's face darkened instantly, his eyes flashing with rage. Without warning, he raised his hand, signaling his men forward. Chaos erupted instantly. Detective Bennett fired a warning shot, narrowly missing one of Alexander's guards, who quickly dodged to the side. Judge Thompson grabbed Jasmine's arm, pulling her towards the back exit. "Run, Jasmine," he shouted desperately. "Run now." Jasmine turned to run, gripping the file tightly, her breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. Behind her, Detective Bennett continued firing her weapon bravely, doing her best to slow the attackers. Suddenly, Jasmine heard a painful cry. Turning briefly, she saw Detective Bennett collapse to the ground, struck from behind by one of Alexander's men. Jasmine felt tears of fear and grief streaming down her face. "No!" Jasmine screamed helplessly, her voice breaking in anguish. But Judge Thompson pulled Jasmine fiercely toward the exit, forcing her to keep moving despite the tragedy they'd just witnessed. He knew they had mere seconds before Alexander reached them. They ran desperately through the dark alleys, their footsteps echoing sharply through the silence of the night. Jasmine struggled to keep going, her heart heavy with guilt and sadness for Detective Bennett. Finally, after running for what felt like forever, Judge Thompson stopped, gasping for breath. They stood in a deserted, narrow alleyway, surrounded by darkness and silence. Jasmine collapsed against the wall, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. "This is all my fault," Jasmine sobbed softly. "Detective Bennett is hurt, or worse, all because of me." Judge Thompson shook his head, placing a gentle, comforting hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "None of this is your fault. It's VexCorp and Alexander Reed who caused this suffering. Detective Bennett knew the risks, and she chose to protect you because she believes in your fight for justice." Jasmine took a deep breath, slowly regaining her composure. She looked down at the precious file, feeling its importance more strongly than ever. "We can't let her sacrifice be in vain. We have to stop them." Judge Thompson nodded solemnly. "We will. But right now we must find safety. I know someone who might help us, a person who knows VexCorp better than anyone else." "Who?" Jasmine asked curiously, wiping her tears away quickly. Judge Thompson hesitated briefly, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "His name is Michael Sinclair. He was once the chief legal advisor at VexCorp, but he turned against them and disappeared years ago. If we find him, we might have a chance." Jasmine felt a renewed sense of hope. "Where can we find him?" Judge Thompson sighed, looking uncertain. "He's hidden himself well, but I know a place he used to visit regularly, a quiet spot near the outskirts of town. If he's still alive, he'll be there." Without hesitation, they quickly made their way through the shadowy streets, staying alert, aware that Alexander's men could still be hunting them. Jasmine's heart raced, knowing their lives depended on finding Michael Sinclair. After a tense and exhausting journey, they finally reached the location. A small, isolated cabin deep in the woods, hidden among tall trees and overgrown bushes. It looked abandoned, the windows dark, the air heavy with silence. Judge Thompson stepped forward cautiously, knocking gently on the door. Silence answered back. Jasmine glanced around nervously, sensing danger lurking nearby. After a moment, the door slowly creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a tall, older man, his face hidden in shadows. "Who's there?" the man asked warily. "Michael." Judge Thompson spoke softly. "It's me, Albert Thompson. I need your help." The man stepped forward into the dim moonlight, his stern features visible now. Michael Sinclair, his gray hair neatly combed back, his eyes intelligent yet guarded. He examined Jasmine and Judge Thompson closely before nodding slowly. "Come in quickly," Michael said firmly, ushering them inside. "We have little time." Inside the cabin, Jasmine felt a sense of safety for the first time since this nightmare had begun. She placed the file carefully on the table, catching Michael's immediate attention. "What's this?" Michael asked curiously. "It's evidence against VexCorp," Jasmine explained urgently. "Proof of corruption, bribery, and other crimes committed by their executives. But they're hunting us down." Michael flipped through the file quickly, his eyes widening in shock. "How did you find this?" "It's a long story," Judge Thompson interrupted gently. "But the short version is Jasmine uncovered their crimes, and now Alexander Reed is after her." Michael looked alarmed at the mention of Alexander's name. "He's ruthless, relentless. He won't stop until you're dead. Can you help us?" Jasmine pleaded desperately. "You know VexCorp better than anyone." Michael hesitated briefly, conflict evident in his eyes. Finally, he sighed deeply, determination filling his voice. "Yes, I'll help you, but we must move quickly. VexCorp will already be tracking your every move." Quickly, Michael packed supplies, food, maps, and additional weapons for protection. Jasmine watched anxiously, knowing their lives depended on every decision they made from this point forward. Just as they prepared to leave, a sudden noise echoed from outside. The sound of vehicles rapidly approaching, engines roaring menacingly through the silence of the woods. "They found us again," Jasmine whispered in fear, her heart sinking. Michael moved quickly to the window, glancing outside urgently. "We must run now. There's a hidden path behind the cabin. It'll lead us deeper into the forest." Hurriedly, they raced out the back door, sprinting desperately along the hidden path. Behind them, headlights illuminated the night, shouts erupting from Alexander's men as they chased after their prey. Jasmine stumbled through the darkness, terror driving her forward. They ran for what felt like hours, deeper into the dense forest, exhaustion setting in rapidly. Suddenly, Jasmine tripped, falling painfully onto the ground. Michael and Judge Thompson stopped quickly, rushing back to help her. But before Jasmine could stand, powerful flashlights shone through the trees, illuminating their faces brightly. Surrounded by darkness, with nowhere left to run, Jasmine watched helplessly as Alexander Reed emerged from the shadows once again, his expression victorious and menacing. "You've run far enough, Jasmine," Alexander sneered cruelly, stepping closer. "Did you truly think you could escape me?" Jasmine's heart broke with despair, realizing there was nowhere left to run. Alexander raised his weapon, pointing it directly toward her. "Hand me that file," Alexander ordered harshly. "Or this ends right now." Jasmine stared at Alexander Reed, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest as the cold metal of his weapon pointed directly at her. They stood frozen in a deadly standoff, surrounded by Alexander's guards, flashlights cutting sharply through the darkness, casting frightening shadows across the faces of Judge Thompson and Michael Sinclair. "I'm losing patience," Alexander warned, his voice ice-cold and deadly calm. "Give me the file now, Jasmine, or watch your friends suffer first." Jasmine trembled slightly, her eyes flickering between Alexander, Judge Thompson, and Michael, desperately searching for a way out. She knew that handing over the file would doom countless innocent lives to continued corruption and suffering. Yet, refusing would mean certain death for her friends. "I can't give it to you," Jasmine said defiantly, her voice strong despite her fear. "Too many lives depend on exposing VexCorp. I won't betray them." Alexander's face hardened dangerously, his finger tightening around the trigger of his weapon. Jasmine held her breath, preparing for the worst. But suddenly, a loud explosion erupted through the forest, shaking the ground violently beneath their feet. Chaos exploded around them instantly. Smoke filled the air, and men shouted in confusion as bright lights flashed wildly, blinding everyone. "Run now," Michael shouted urgently, grabbing Jasmine's arm tightly, pulling her swiftly through the chaos. Judge Thompson followed closely behind, running desperately as explosions continued around them, scattering Alexander's men in panic. "What's happening?" Jasmine shouted, terrified and confused. Help arrived just in time. Michael yelled back, leading her swiftly deeper into the woods. "I called for reinforcements before you arrived. They found us." Relief flooded Jasmine's heart, hope returning fiercely despite the terrifying explosions and smoke filling the forest. She ran desperately, trusting Michael completely as he led them to safety. After several exhausting minutes, the explosions faded into distant echoes, and they slowed to a careful stop, breathing heavily in the dark shadows of towering trees. Jasmine looked around anxiously, relief mixing with fear. They were safe, at least temporarily. Who saved us? Jasmine asked breathlessly, leaning against a tree for support. Michael smiled slightly, his eyes filled with relief. Friends from my old team, loyal people who left VexCorp when I did. They're fighting back now, risking everything to help. Jasmine nodded gratefully, her heart still racing. Will they be okay? They're tough, Michael assured her gently. They know how to handle this. But we must keep moving. Alexander won't give up easily. Judge Thompson nodded, still shaken by their narrow escape. Michael's right. We have to keep moving. Carefully, they made their way deeper into the woods, Michael guiding them skillfully along hidden paths known only to him. Jasmine felt safer with each passing step, though her anxiety still lingered, knowing Alexander would pursue them again soon. After hours of quiet walking, they arrived at another secret hideout, an old, abandoned farmhouse deep in the countryside, hidden safely from prying eyes. Jasmine immediately felt comforted by its isolated location. Inside, Michael quickly secured the doors and windows, ensuring their safety. He lit candles softly, illuminating the darkened room warmly. Jasmine collapsed into a chair, exhausted and shaken. Rest now, Michael instructed gently. You're safe here. Judge Thompson nodded reassuringly. We'll stay alert while you rest. But Jasmine couldn't relax. Her mind raced anxiously, thinking about everything they'd been through. She stared at the file, knowing it was their only chance at justice. After several quiet moments, she asked softly, Michael, what's really in this file that makes it so important to VexCorp? Michael sighed deeply, glancing nervously toward Judge Thompson before finally answering. VexCorp controls the courts, police, even the government. But their greatest secret, the thing they fear most, is that the file contains proof of their most dangerous crime. What crime? Jasmine asked, leaning forward urgently. Michael hesitated briefly, then spoke carefully. Years ago, VexCorp covered up a terrible tragedy, a deadly chemical spill caused by their negligence. Thousands of people became sick, hundreds lost their lives, but VexCorp buried the truth, bribing officials and silencing survivors. That file contains all the evidence, including names, dates, and financial records. If it becomes public, it will destroy their power forever. Jasmine's heart raced with anger and determination. They've harmed so many people. We must expose them. Michael nodded firmly. That's why they'll stop at nothing to silence you. Just then, a gentle knocking sounded at the farmhouse door, causing them all to tense immediately. Judge Thompson quickly moved to the window, peering cautiously outside. It's okay, he said softly, relieved. It's Detective Bennett. Jasmine leaped to her feet instantly, tears of relief flooding her eyes as the door opened to reveal Detective Bennett, bruised and bandaged, but alive and determined. Jasmine hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by emotion. You're alive, Jasmine cried joyfully. Detective Bennett smiled warmly, reassuring Jasmine quickly. I managed to escape Alexander's men. But we don't have long, they tracked me here. Everyone froze, suddenly alert. Michael quickly grabbed his weapon, preparing to defend them. Jasmine felt dread return instantly. But Detective Bennett held up her hand quickly, calming their fears. We still have time. I saw Alexander's men gathering miles from here. But they'll come soon. Michael nodded, quickly formulating a plan. Then we must act immediately. We'll get the evidence to someone trustworthy, someone with the power to expose VexCorp to the entire world. Who? Jasmine asked anxiously. Senator Amelia Hartley, Michael replied firmly. She's fought corruption for years and openly opposes VexCorp. If we get her this file, she'll ensure justice. Then let's do it now, Jasmine said eagerly, filled with determination. Quickly, they prepared to leave, gathering supplies urgently. Michael called Senator Hartley, arranging an immediate meeting at her heavily guarded office in the city. As they prepared to leave, Jasmine paused, feeling deep anxiety return. What if Alexander gets there first? Michael's eyes narrowed seriously. We'll move fast and carefully. But Jasmine, if anything happens, promise you'll protect that file above all else. I promise, Jasmine nodded solemnly, gripping the file tightly. Soon, they drove silently toward the city, every moment filled with tense, quiet fear. Jasmine clutched the file protectively, knowing their future depended entirely on reaching Senator Hartley first. As they approached the senator's office building, Detective Bennett parked discreetly nearby, carefully checking their surroundings. They hurried quietly toward the entrance, Michael leading cautiously, weapon ready. Inside, security greeted them swiftly, guiding them immediately toward Senator Hartley's private office. Jasmine felt relief flood through her heart, finally believing they'd succeeded. But just as they approached Senator Hartley's office door, it swung open slowly, revealing Alexander Reed standing calmly, sinisterly smiling. Beside him stood Senator Hartley herself, her expression cold and indifferent. "Welcome, Jasmine," Senator Hartley said softly, her voice chillingly calm. "We've been expecting you." Jasmine stepped back in shock, betrayal gripping her heart instantly. "No, you're working with VexCorp?" Senator Hartley smiled cruelly, stepping closer. "Not working with them. I own VexCorp." Jasmine felt her knees weaken, disbelief overwhelming her entirely. Alexander Reed stepped forward calmly, raising his weapon once more. "Thank you for delivering that file directly to us," Alexander sneered cruelly. "Now your journey ends here." Surrounded, betrayed, and helpless, Jasmine felt all hope vanish entirely. Her fight for justice seemed doomed to fail completely. Jasmine stood frozen, her mind spinning with disbelief and shock. Senator Amelia Hartley, someone she had trusted deeply, admired even, stood calmly beside Alexander Reed, revealing herself as the true mastermind behind VexCorp. The betrayal cut Jasmine deeply, piercing her heart like ice. Senator Hartley smiled softly, a terrifying calmness in her eyes. "I must thank you again, Jasmine," she said smoothly. "You have done us an immense favor by delivering this dangerous file directly into our hands." Judge Thompson, Michael Sinclair, and Detective Bennett stood close behind Jasmine, tense and stunned. Each faced their own disbelief at Hartley's treachery. "Why?" Jasmine finally asked, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You've always fought for justice. You've always stood up against corruption. Why would you betray everyone who believed in you?" Senator Hartley laughed softly, an unsettling, chilling sound. "Appearances are often deceiving, Jasmine. Power has its price, and the power VexCorp gives me is greater than any naive dream of justice. You've wasted your energy fighting an impossible battle." Alexander Reed stepped forward, holding out his hand impatiently. "Now hand over that file. Make this easy, and perhaps we'll let your friends live." Jasmine's heart beat painfully in her chest. She glanced back desperately at her friends, who stood bravely despite their grim situation. Michael met her gaze, his eyes silently urging her to stay strong. "No," Jasmine finally said firmly, refusing to hand over the file. "I'll never surrender this evidence. You can threaten us, but justice will always find its way." Senator Hartley's expression hardened dangerously. "Very well, Jasmine. You've made your choice. Alexander, deal with them." Alexander raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Jasmine, preparing to end everything instantly. Jasmine closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. But suddenly, before Alexander could fire, the building shook violently, an explosion erupting somewhere nearby, rattling the walls and shattering windows. Chaos filled the room instantly as alarms blared, and smoke quickly filled the hallway. Security guards rushed in panic, shouting confused orders. Jasmine's heart leaped with sudden hope, realizing another unexpected rescue had arrived. Michael acted swiftly, taking advantage of the confusion. "Run! Follow me!" he shouted urgently, grabbing Jasmine's arm tightly, pulling her toward the emergency staircase. Judge Thompson and Detective Bennett quickly followed, racing desperately away from Alexander and Hartley's reach. They fled down the stairs, smoke choking their lungs, alarms echoing wildly behind them. Finally reaching the ground floor, they burst out into the night air, coughing, gasping, and stumbling forward. Outside, emergency vehicles rapidly approached, lights flashing urgently. Jasmine saw a familiar face rushing towards them. Captain Daniel Harris, an honest police officer Jasmine had known and trusted for years. "Jasmine," Captain Harris called anxiously, helping them quickly into a waiting vehicle. "We have no time. Get in now." As they drove swiftly away from danger, Jasmine's breathing slowly calmed, though her heart continued racing. She glanced toward Captain Harris, desperate for answers. "How did you know we were in trouble?" Jasmine asked softly. Captain Harris sighed deeply, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I'd been secretly investigating Senator Hartley and VexCorp for months, but I lacked evidence. When Michael's allies contacted me tonight, I immediately understood the urgency. "Thank you," Jasmine whispered gratefully, relief flooding through her. But their relief was short-lived. Michael spoke up urgently, reminding everyone sharply of their grim reality. "We may have escaped, but Senator Hartley controls everything. As long as she remains free, VexCorp will hunt us forever." Judge Thompson nodded solemnly. "Then we must act immediately. If we can't trust authorities, we must find another way to expose them." Captain Harris quickly nodded in agreement. "There's one person left who still has the power to stop Hartley, the president himself. If we can reach him directly, we might finally end this." "Can we trust him?" Jasmine asked cautiously, shaken by recent betrayals. "I believe we can," Captain Harris assured firmly. "But we must hurry. Hartley won't waste time in eliminating us." Together, they made swift plans to reach the president directly, knowing their window of opportunity was rapidly shrinking. Captain Harris made several careful phone calls, pulling strings, desperately arranging a private meeting at the presidential residence. After tense hours of preparation and careful movement, they finally stood outside the heavily guarded gates of the presidential mansion. Security quickly verified their identities, allowing them cautious entry. Jasmine felt hopeful yet wary, fully aware this was their final chance. Inside, the president greeted them warmly, his expression deeply concerned. "I've heard much about you, Jasmine Crockett," he said kindly. "Tell me everything you know." Jasmine quickly handed him the file, explaining every detail passionately, outlining VexCorp's horrific crimes and Senator Hartley's shocking betrayal. The president listened carefully, visibly troubled and shocked by what he learned. When Jasmine finished, silence filled the room, heavy and anxious. Finally, the president nodded seriously, determination clear in his voice. "You've risked everything to bring this truth forward. Senator Hartley and VexCorp will be immediately investigated and stopped. Justice will prevail, I promise." Relief filled Jasmine's heart, tears of hope forming softly in her eyes. Finally, after so much suffering and betrayal, justice seemed possible once again. But suddenly, the president's door burst open, revealing Senator Hartley herself, flanked by armed guards loyal only to her. Jasmine felt dread instantly return, fear gripping her once more. "You've made a terrible mistake, Mr. President," Hartley sneered cruelly. "Believing Jasmine's lies will cost you dearly. You cannot silence the truth forever," Jasmine shouted defiantly, courage blazing within her again. "Perhaps not," Senator Hartley smiled dangerously. "But I can silence you." Instantly, her guards raised their weapons, preparing to end Jasmine's fight once and for all. Panic filled the room, everyone frozen, helpless. But in the final desperate moment, Detective Bennett lunged bravely toward Jasmine, shielding her from harm just as gunshots erupted loudly around them. Jasmine screamed, heartbroken, as Detective Bennett collapsed again, wounded gravely this time. Captain Harris acted immediately, returning fire courageously, driving Hartley's guards back temporarily, buying precious seconds. "Go now," Captain Harris shouted urgently. "I'll handle this. Escape quickly." Michael and Judge Thompson swiftly pulled Jasmine from danger, racing desperately toward a hidden exit, the sound of gunshots echoing sharply behind them. Tears streamed down Jasmine's face, grief and fear overwhelming her completely. They ran desperately through the presidential grounds, adrenaline fueling their exhausted bodies. Finally, after a frantic escape, they reached temporary safety, collapsing breathlessly together. Jasmine wept softly, mourning Detective Bennett's brave sacrifice. "This must end," she whispered brokenly. "No more lives lost." Michael gently comforted her. "It will end. Senator Hartley has revealed herself fully now. She won't escape justice forever." Just then, Captain Harris approached, exhausted and injured slightly but alive. They fled. "The president is safe. He's already mobilizing loyal authorities to act against VexCorp. Hartley will soon be arrested. It's finally over." Relief flooded Jasmine entirely, exhaustion finally overcoming her. But just as hope returned completely, her phone rang suddenly. Hesitantly, she answered. "Jasmine," Alexander Reed's chilling voice spoke darkly. "You think you've won, but think again. I have your mother. Surrender yourself immediately, or you'll never see her again." Fear and anguish crushed Jasmine instantly, Alexander's cruel laughter echoing through the phone as it abruptly disconnected. Jasmine's hands shook uncontrollably as the horrible reality sunk deeply into her heart. Despite their victory, Alexander had one final, ruthless card left to play. Jasmine now faced an impossible choice: save her mother or finally defeat VexCorp forever. Jasmine's heart felt shattered, dread filling every inch of her body as Alexander Reed's chilling threat echoed painfully in her mind. Her hands trembled, her breath uneven as she turned toward her friends, despair clear in her dark eyes. "They have my mother," Jasmine whispered brokenly, barely able to speak the terrible truth aloud. "Alexander says I must surrender, or they'll harm her." Judge Thompson paled visibly, compassion and horror etched deeply on his face. Michael Sinclair shook his head in grim frustration, while Captain Harris stared solemnly, considering their next move carefully. "No matter what happens," Michael finally said, his voice heavy but determined, "we can't surrender now. Giving yourself up won't guarantee your mother's safety. We must find another way." Jasmine shook her head, tears slipping softly down her face. "She's my mother. I can't risk her life, not even to stop VexCorp." Captain Harris gently placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Jasmine, Alexander is ruthless. He'll never let your mother go willingly. We must outsmart him, find a way to rescue her without giving in." Jasmine nodded shakily, desperately trying to steady herself. She knew Captain Harris was right, yet fear for her mother overwhelmed her. Suddenly, Jasmine's phone rang again, startling everyone. She answered quickly, her voice trembling anxiously. "Hello. Hello, Jasmine." Alexander's calm, cruel voice sent chills down her spine. "Have you decided yet? Your mother waits patiently, but I don't." "Let me speak to her first," Jasmine demanded, her voice barely controlled. "I need proof she's okay." Alexander laughed softly, coldly amused by Jasmine's desperation. "Fine, say hello, Mrs. Crockett." "Jasmine." Her mother's voice, fragile and terrified, pierced Jasmine's heart painfully. "Don't come, please. Save yourself." Before her mother finished, Alexander interrupted harshly, his tone chilling again. "Satisfied? Meet me alone at the abandoned factory tonight, or she'll suffer greatly." The call ended abruptly, leaving Jasmine shaken and filled with anguish. She knew she had little choice now. "I'm going," Jasmine said finally, determination fierce despite her fear. "But I won't let Alexander win. We'll rescue my mother and expose VexCorp together." Michael nodded approvingly, quickly devising a strategic plan. Captain Harris and Judge Thompson gathered necessary resources, weapons, and backup support from loyal officers determined to end VexCorp forever. Hours later, under cover of darkness, Jasmine arrived at the abandoned factory. The massive, looming structure stood silent and ominous in the shadows. Her heart raced wildly as she stepped inside cautiously, carefully glancing around for any sign of her mother or Alexander Reed. "Hello, Jasmine." Alexander's cold voice echoed suddenly from above. Jasmine turned sharply, finding him standing on a metal platform above her, flanked by armed guards, holding her mother tightly beside him. "Let my mother go, Alexander." Jasmine shouted defiantly, her voice echoing bravely through the factory. "This is between us, not her." Alexander smiled cruelly, gripping Mrs. Crockett tighter. "Your mother became involved when you chose to defy us. Now give me that evidence file, and she leaves unharmed." Jasmine hesitated, carefully lifting the file she'd brought, considering Alexander's ruthless demand. But her hesitation wasn't surrender. It was calculated, deliberate. "I'll give you the file," Jasmine finally called loudly, her voice clear and strong, "but only after my mother is safely released." Alexander considered carefully, finally nodding slowly. "Fine. Release her," he commanded his guards. Mrs. Crockett stumbled free, rushing toward Jasmine swiftly. Jasmine quickly embraced her mother tightly, relief washing through her briefly. But as she handed the file forward to Alexander, she whispered secretly to her mother, "Stay low, get ready." Just as Alexander eagerly grabbed the file from Jasmine's hands, a sudden explosion erupted near the factory entrance. Chaos instantly filled the air as Captain Harris, Michael Sinclair, and their loyal allies rushed inside, battling Alexander's guards fiercely. Alexander turned furiously, realizing he'd been tricked. Jasmine immediately shielded her mother protectively, moving swiftly towards safety amidst the fierce fighting. "You'll pay for this," Alexander shouted angrily, desperately trying to escape with the file. Jasmine, however, raced forward courageously, determined to stop him once and for all. The factory erupted into a fierce struggle, bullets flying, metal clanging loudly, the air thick with tension. Jasmine tackled Alexander suddenly, knocking him down. They fought viciously, Jasmine struggling bravely against Alexander's strength and aggression. Finally, Jasmine managed to wrestle the file away, her breath coming in painful gasps. Alexander rose again, his eyes blazing with hatred and desperation. But before he could attack, Captain Harris swiftly arrested him, handcuffing him firmly. "It's over, Alexander," Jasmine said quietly, relief flooding her entirely. Alexander stared coldly at her, defiant yet powerless. "This isn't finished yet." But Jasmine shook her head, confidently clutching the precious file. "You're wrong. VexCorp ends tonight." Outside, loyal police units swiftly arrested Senator Hartley and the remaining corrupt officials connected to VexCorp. News spread rapidly, finally exposing their horrific crimes publicly, bringing justice at last to countless victims. In the days following, Jasmine, her mother, Judge Thompson, Michael Sinclair, and Captain Harris worked tirelessly, assisting investigations, revealing evidence, and rebuilding public trust. Jasmine quickly became a symbol of bravery and justice, celebrated widely for her incredible courage. One quiet evening, Jasmine sat alone with her mother, finally feeling peace return slowly to their lives. Mrs. Crockett gently touched her daughter's cheek, pride shining clearly in her warm eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Jasmine," she whispered gently. "You've risked everything for justice." Jasmine smiled softly, embracing her mother lovingly. "I had no choice. Justice always matters, no matter the cost." But just as peace seemed fully restored, Jasmine's phone buzzed urgently again, anxiety immediately filling her heart. Carefully, she answered, wary of any lingering danger. "Hello." Jasmine Crockett, a deep, unfamiliar voice spoke firmly. "You don't know me yet, but I know you very well. You dismantled VexCorp impressively. But now, we have a far greater battle awaiting us." "What battle?" Jasmine asked cautiously, concern growing swiftly. The voice paused gravely, finally speaking heavily. Alexander and Hartley were merely pieces in a much larger, more dangerous game. VexCorp was only the beginning. There's a shadow group, powerful people controlling everything from behind the scenes. I need your help to stop them before it's too late. Jasmine felt dread creep deeply into her heart again. Yet determination quickly returned fiercely within her, courage shining clearly once more. "Tell me more," Jasmine said firmly, ready to face whatever awaited her next. The unknown caller sighed deeply, gravely continuing, "Meet me tomorrow alone. I'll explain everything. But know this, if you agree to this battle, you'll face greater danger than you've ever imagined." Jasmine paused thoughtfully, knowing her decision would forever shape her future. Finally, with powerful resolve, she answered firmly, confidently, "I accept." The call ended quietly, leaving Jasmine staring into the darkness ahead, knowing her fight for justice was far from over. VexCorp was defeated, but even greater threats loomed now, waiting to challenge her courage again. Yet Jasmine felt no fear, only powerful determination. Her journey had just begun, but she'd proven already that truth and justice always prevailed. No matter what awaited her, Jasmine Crockett would bravely face it, ready to fight again, determined to ensure justice always shined brightly, even in the deepest shadows.